Hi all. I want to make a few recordings about Connor family history so that you, I, and our children know the background of our family, which I myself didn't know too much about, and I don't know if you guys do. So I've done some research. And for this first video, I wanted to show you the story of someone who doesn't seem like any of us knew that well, um, but who clearly lived a very interesting life. It is our grandpa Donald's aunt named Charlotte Mary Connor. She was born in 1875. She lived to 1974, so 99 years old, which is amazing. And let's get into it. So the first thing to do is to go through who our family is. It sounds like an obvious thing, but since I personally didn't know much beyond uh, basically Grandpa Donald. I'm going to assume that some of you don't as well, so I'll just lead you through the background a little bit so that we can understand where Charlotte fits in all that. So essentially, here's a family tree. Here's Donald Connor, our grandfather. Here's his father, Francis Wallace Connor, and then his grandfather, Peter Connor, and his grandmother, Catherine Pigeon. And Peter Connor's parents are John Connor and Anne Fitzpatrick. Um, and so, as a backstory, John Connor and Anne Fitzpatrick came from Ireland. They moved to Malone, New York. I'll show you a map in a second. Catherine Pigeon's family is actually very fascinating. I want to do another video on that. She's from Canada. They're from an old prestigious family that's been in colonial America since forever, with lots of stories. Uh, but otherwise, yeah, immigrant family from Ireland, and then Peter Connor's first generation American, and then Francis Wallace Connor, so our great grandfather, and all of his siblings are second generation, including Charlotte Mary Connor, right here. Put on a map. Here's what it is. Around the 1840s, John and Anne Fitzpatrick Connor moved to Malone, New York, which is way upstate New York, up here by Montreal. Settle down, have a family. One of their sons, Peter Connor, around 1870, moves to Keene, New Hampshire. This is sort of the center of, this is where our, if I were to name a place where our family is from, I would label this Keene, New Hampshire, which is unsurprising to me. I didn't even know we were New England, but we are very New England. At the same time, Catherine Pigeon, as I mentioned, Peter Connor's wife, and our great grandmother, moved from Villanova, Ontario, around 1860, up to Western Michigan in Newaygo County. Andy, you might be interested to go visit. The city was called Brooks, and we have a lot of family out there by extension, by the way. And then around 1870, around the same time that Peter Connor came to New Hampshire, Catherine Pigeon ends up in New Hampshire. They get married and start a family. So that's the story of how our family got to Keene, New Hampshire, which just has two things to know. It's a big railroad town because there are a lot of New England lines that went through it, and it's a university town. There's a state university there that's been there for a long time. Okay, so Charlotte Connor, in all that, was born in Keene, New Hampshire in 1875. While she was there, she got trained as a nurse. She has 2 years of college, presumably for that nursing training. And then she kind of drops off the map until 1918, where at the age of 43, she was living in Tustin, Montana. And not a city in Montana, probably one of the more rural parts of Montana. Right now, Tustin has a population of 180 8, I think it was that Wikipedia said. So she's living there, and she's called into active service November 1918 as a nurse for the military, which is surprisingly common in our family. We have another relative, Daisy May Connor, her sister, who also served in the military as a nurse during World War One. But where Daisy got sent to France, Charlotte got sent to San Francisco to serve in Letterman General Hospitals. That's what the GH stands for, Letterman General Hospital. And that's where she served for 6 months until May 1919. This is what Letterman General Hospital looks like, what it is. It was a hospital designed for state-of-the-art technology for the Army. It was one of the first facilities to employ women in the Army Nurse Corps, of whom Charlotte is a member. And this is where she was. And why that's important isn't just because it's what she did during World War One, which is still quite a bit, right? But it's because as a consequence of this, she actually stayed in the Bay Area. She lived in San Francisco for about a decade, and then she moved a little bit to San Jose, which is like, like a short drive. So because of this, she ends up on the West Coast in California. We actually have her address, 380 South 11th Street, if you want to see the old spot, I guess. And this is the discharge papers from the VA. And yeah, and so she stayed in the Bay Area for the rest of her life. Keep in mind, she was 43 when she was called up in 1918, right? So she's already middle age. And then once she stays in the San Francisco area, as I mentioned, she settles down in San Jose. And the reason why I'm bringing this up as sort of the fascinating point I want to point out about Charlotte is that in 1950, she's publicly documented in the censuses as being partnered up with a Catherine Ruth Stone. Now, I mean publicly, I mean publicly. Here's the census record, 1950. Here's Catherine Stone, and here's Charlotte Connor, and the relationship is listed as partner. Now, I know what I'm supposed to think about the 50s, and I know what you guys are supposed to think. So when I see this, I'm like, that's a very bold thing to do, right? Like, it's very clear that she went her own way and was very public with her sexuality and didn't care. And that's pretty, at a time when that was just not acceptable, it's pretty bold. And so that's why I wanted to share this, is that even way back then, Connor family members were being very, what's the right word? Contrary to the rest of society, I guess is how I put it. And it's a very sweet story, right? This is 1950. She didn't die for another 24 years. So in 1974, she does pass away at the age of 99. And here she is buried with her partner, Catherine Stone, who died 5 years later, also quite old. So yeah, they just lived their life together and very public about it. Clearly didn't care too much. And that's sort of where it settled. So I just wanted to document that. I think that's good to know. Another thing to know on that topic is not only was it very public, but clearly our family didn't care too much and seemed to have liked it. What I mean by that is, as you can see, here is Charlotte's journey, right? Starts in New Hampshire, moves way, way, way over to Montana, like as far away from anyone as you can possibly imagine. Moves to San Francisco and then San Jose after the war. But then her youngest sibling, Lewis Connor, in 1940, decides basically to join her in the Bay Area, moving over to Fort Bragg. And he actually opens up a cafe there with his second wife. He was like a cafe, quick restaurant, like hot dog stand type restaurateur in New York, in Brooklyn, and he moves over here which again, as far away from the rest of the family you can possibly get. And then not only that, but in 1950, we have documentation that Daisy Connor, who I mentioned earlier, is serving in France as a nurse, also moved from the East Coast over to San Francisco, and she too lived in San Francisco for the rest of her life. Um, so we have Charlotte and two of her siblings all living in the Bay Area, um, clearly joining each other. And so, yeah, the family was clearly fine with her relationship and all that, and there were no problems. And so it's kind of sad to me that we didn't really hear about it, but I think it's good to know now. So that's what I wanted to share today about a member of our family. And I hope to make more of these videos. As I mentioned, our Canadian connections are very interesting. Let me know if you find this interesting. All right. Take care all.